Thanks everyone for joining me again. I saw a couple of the pictures that everyone posted on the website. You can submit them for viewing, and I didn't get to everybody critiquing, but I am going to go over a couple of things today that I saw from last week. And so let me just start off with saying, let's go over our supplies. How about that? So that I know everybody's ready to go. Make sure you have some 140-pound watercolor paper. Let me just make sure it says watercolor on it. I get the 140-pound. It's nice, thick, sturdy paper. So we have that. And have several pieces because we're going to, and they don't have to be big. They can be small. Don't worry about cutting them up though. I have several different sizes, as you can see. Okay, then we have our watercolors. You can do the squeezy kind. Also, if you have the puck kind, that's fine too. And then make sure you have some brushes. And make sure you have, and I have a size 12 here, I have a size 8, and I have a size 6. 4 works well, a 10 works well. Just make sure they're round, and we'll talk about these in just a second. I have 2 cups, a dirty cup and one that will be clean, and they're right close at hand so that I can reach them if I need to. And then I have a pencil, just in case if I need it. And today I asked if you don't have this, that's okay, but if you have some tape, I use drafting tape, but plain old masking tape works really well. Just don't use blue painter's tape. Blue painter's tape tears the paper. So either masking tape or drafting tape works. And then make sure you have something in which to put your colors on. If it's a paper plate, if it's a real plate, I actually use a real plate all the time. If you have a piece of parchment paper, right? You can use a piece of parchment paper. Also, make sure you have a couple of paper towels at hand so that you can dry off your brush a little bit. Okay. So first thing I wanted to mention was I got a couple questions this last week on some things, and I'm just going to go over a few of them just because one person asked doesn't mean that a couple of you don't have the same question. One question I thought was interesting, and it's a really good question, was, okay, so I can't find the squeezy paints, so I have the hard paints, yet I find it really, really hard to get the color to be as dark as a squeezy paint. And that's going to be true across the board, and I'll tell you why. This already, when you squeeze it out, is already wet. So you just need a little bit of water or a lot of water, depending on what you're doing. Oh, you don't need a size 12 brush. I just saw somebody's comments. 10 works fine. I just had a bunch right here. So a 10, an 8, 6, it's okay. I just had a 12 on hand. Don't worry if you don't have a big one. Okay, sorry. I see questions pop up every now and then, and I'd like to answer them if I can. But anyway, so I don't need a lot of water to activate the pigment inside of a tube paint. I don't need a lot. However, when it comes in a hard form, really, really hard, right, I need to make it into a liquid before I can actually activate the pigment. So it actually takes a little bit longer to get yourself, and I'm just going to show you, okay, I'm going to try it on this color right here, right? So I put my first wave of water in, right? And if you have something like the lid or something, you notice that's not very intense. Well, that's because it's mostly just water at this point, because you haven't really activated the pigment yet. You're just trying to get it wet. So what I like to do is I like to put in the water, and I like to really just kind of rub it around. Just really get it rubbed around in there, because you're trying to just activate that pigment. Okay, and then I can scoop up a bunch and I can put it right here on my palette. Okay, that's still pretty watery. So then what I do is I actually clean off my brush a little bit. Okay, and then I bring more water to the table so that it's more water and not as much pigment, so that when I scrub it again, notice I'm using rounding circles. If you're pushing too hard and you're not really working with your brush, guess what's going to happen? You're going to ruin your brush. And it doesn't matter if it's a good brush or a bad brush or whatever. If you push too hard, you're just going to ruin that brush. So now I've got a bunch on my brush here, and I'm going to put it right over here again. And you see it's getting a little bit darker. Okay. And by far, I have to say, especially if you get the cheaper ones, right, it's going to take a lot to activate them, and still they're going to be a lot lighter than if you were to use the squeezy tubes or the really expensive hard pucks. So my comment to what happens if it's not, you know, dark enough. If you're going to use something like this that's on the cheaper end of the scale, it will always be lighter, and that's just because it's on the cheaper end of the scale. But you can still work with it. See how I'm like picking up that pigment, and then I'm heading over here to that, and then from here I can, right, and it's still going to be pretty light, right? To get that really intense, I'm going to just have to keep working at it, right? Anyway, and then if I want to lighten that, then I could just come in here with some water. Okay, so that's something about the two different kinds of paint. So if you're not getting the result that you want based on my what I'm doing today, it's probably because you're using a paint like this, and it doesn't have to be bright. I just want you to know that. I mean, if you want it bright, then go back and get like a brighter tube paint. You can get them at Hobby Lobby, and you can get them at Walmart, at Michael's. And actually was in Hobby Lobby the other day, and you can get them whatever colors, just one at a time. You don't have to get a kit. So if you just want to get a couple of colors, and I know they were on sale. So anyway, that's something that you could try to do with your colors. Okay, and then another question that popped up was, I'm losing bristles on my brush. Okay, so I would recommend to spend a little bit on the brushes. If you get a pack of brushes, the ones I showed you, if it has a white, let me show, if it has white bristles, those tend to do better than the brown bristles. However, if you buy the expensive watercolor, so yeah, Michael's is sold out of the 2 paint set recommended, then you can always just go and the Michael's one, Artist Loft, is actually on an end cap. It's not, sometimes it's over by the watercolors, but sometimes it's on the end cap. You can still go to Hobby Lobby and you can get some. So look around. I mean, that's all I can say, right? So, but the brushes, if you go to the watercolor section in Michael's or even Hobby Lobby, and you get, if you want to buy a really good brush, get yourself a size 8 brush. That's a good idea. Amazon, you can get something, and it usually comes in 2 days for the brushes. So you could, if you wanted to, you could get on Amazon and find some paint tube watercolors, and they'll get here in a couple days, and they're half the price. So that's a good recommendation. Thanks for that tip, whoever. So I would stick with either the white bristle brushes in the packs, or get yourself the really good watercolor brushes and get a size 8 and maybe a 4. Those 2 are good. And then you could use a coupon. And you can still use those for acrylic. You wouldn't use them for watercolor, but you could use those for a lot of things. A round brush is kind of like the hammer in a toolbox. You're going to need it eventually, or a screwdriver, right? So the round is a very essential brush. So if you want to spend a couple dollars, get yourself a 40% off coupon on your phone, get yourself a good brush, and then you won't have to deal with any of the bristles coming out. And then another tip. If you've never done watercolor before, but if you've painted before, I have a lot of people that I see in my classes, I watch them paint, and they paint like they're painting acrylics. And when you are doing watercolor, it's a completely different. You let the water and the paint do the work, not necessarily the brush. So you should never be scrubbing it, right? I only scrub if it's on here, right? If I'm trying to activate some paints, right? And I still do that in a circle motion. We're not doing dry brushes where we're just like, if you see streaks in your painting, that means you're not using enough water. Okay, that means you're pushing too hard on your brush. And that's one, you're not going to get the desired result that you like because you'll see streaks. And number two, you're going to ruin your brush faster. So really pay attention to how much water you're using, okay? And that's just kind of a learned behavior. It's a practice behavior. Okay, so hopefully that answered some questions, and we're going to get right into it. So what I'd like everybody to do is I'd like you to get a piece of paper. It can be bigger than this. I'm just going to use a small one. And if you have some tape here, I'm going to tape it down. And I like to tape mine, like I work off center just a little bit. Okay. The reason why I'm taping down this paint is because I want a nice clean edge. This is going to give me a good clean edge. I just have to make sure I press it really good. So for those of you that have ever had to do painting in your house, and you want a clean line, you know that you have to push it down a little bit. Okay, see how I'm just kind of rubbing my finger along there. Now for those of you that don't have tape, you can skip this step. This is not necessary, but I want to show you what it looks like in the end and how it just kind of gives you that really good solid line. It gives you something to work on. So this right here is drafting tape. You don't need drafting tape. You can get regular old masking tape. The masking tape that's yellow, right in Walmart. You can get it at Lowe's. You can get it at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, any kind of place. Okay, just not blue or green painter's tape. Just don't get painter's tape. I'm just looking for simple masking tape. Okay. And I would actually prefer using masking tape here, but I don't have it. So I have to use my expensive drafting tape today. So I would prefer masking tape. Okay, now that you have this here, we're going to do the mountain scene again. And I'm going to show you a little bit more detail. And then we're going to do a flower. Okay, so we should have time for both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, and I'm going to kind of, you don't have to do this, but I like to do this. I'm dividing my paper into thirds, and you can eyeball it if you want. Thirds is always a really good place to start, okay? And so I'm just going to, on that top third, I'm going to give myself a mountain range. Now, what did I say about this kind of stuff? Nope, we're not going to do that. So you can do exactly what I did if you wanted. That's fine. And then I'm going to go for a second, and I'm going to do it right in between those two thirds, okay? Those thirds. And I'm going to go come down first, and then up a little bit, and then down, and down again, and maybe up. See how it's just a little bit different than my top one? I don't want them to all look the same. Nice and lightly. I'm going to actually erase this a little bit because when you, and then on that last one right here, And then right down here, I'm going to draw a line. So you should have 4 lines on your paper. And the only one that's straight is this bottom one. Okay. And then I'm going to just come in with an eraser or something, and I'm just going to kind of erase it a little bit so I can barely see it. So you guys can kind of see it. And the reason why is because when we go over this with paint, you'll be able to see every pencil line. You will. So I kind of erase it a little bit, not fully, but just enough so I can still see my lines. Okay. Now I'm going to get my paint ready. And everybody's going to use the same paint today just to make this easier. Okay. If you want to practice this so that you're using a different kind of, if you want to use a different color, that's fine. But do that as a practice. So today we're going to take a blue, and I'm going to pick a regular blue out of my drawer. It can be ultramarine blue is a really good blue. And look at that. Do I have one of those? Okay, I lied. I can't find my ultramarine blue. So everybody, we're going to use purple. Find yourself a purple. If you got a squeezy one, just the violet. It's a purple, right? Oh, what did I mention last week? If you don't kind of mix it up a little bit, it comes out yucky, gross. I just kind of give it a little zhuzh. See that? Make sure the lid's on. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a... Whew. Okay, we can get some purple. Now, if all you have is puck paint, just find your purple. Okay, you're fine. You'll be fine. Okay, and we talked about this last week. The opposite of purple on the color wheel that makes it so pretty is a little bit of yellow. Okay, those are complementary colors. And I can remember that because yellow is a primary color. And the other 2 primary colors besides yellow are red and blue. And you mix those together and that's its opposite. So yellow and purple are complementary. They love each other, except if you mix them half and half and then they create mud. Okay. So now that I have this, now if it says tube paint, it's already activated. If it's not, work it a little bit. And what I'm going to do first, oh, you are going to need a blue. And it can be any blue. I'm just going to do a little teeny bit of blue right here. Okay, does not matter what kind of blue. Just a teeny little bit of blue. Okay. And what I'm going to do first is we're going to do wet on wet. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my brush, and it's fairly wet. This is a pretty wet brush, okay? What I like to do is this. I get it, and it's drippy, drippy, drippy. So I just swipe it one time. And that gives me a pretty wet brush. And I'm going to come here at the top, and I'm going to outline sky. Okay, so you're going to come in here, you're going to outline that sky. Don't go into the mountains. And you're going to get it nice and wet. Water is your friend. You can tell that it's wet because it has a little bit of shine to it. And I'm just going to come here, and this is called wet on wet. And then I'm going to get my wet paint. So I'm going to get a little bit of water on my brush again. And I'm just going to come in, and I'm just going to get some water, and I'm going to mix it with that blue. I'm not going to go straight in and dip it here because this is not acrylic. I always have to activate it with water. Okay. And then I have a wet brush on wet paper, And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to let it, see how I'm going to just swipe it across the top a little bit. And I'm just going to let it, and you can dab it, you can kind of play with it, right? And I'm just going to make a soft little sky, just a soft little sky. If you have dipped in here, straight from here and gone like that, you see how dark that is? That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for soft, soft, soft. So you get soft, soft, soft by taking a little teeny bit of the pigment and mixing it. Now, if I'm on one of these, what I would have done is I would have come in here and I would have activated it really good, like I showed you. And you see how a lot lighter that is, right? And I'm just going to work with it until it's the color that I want. And then it's activated. Okay, it doesn't take much for that, but it takes a little bit more for that. And I'm just going to touch it, okay? Now, let's say that you have put on a lot of paint, a lot of water, and you're just not sure about it. You can go in and you can dab it, but look, it takes off, like it takes it all off, right? So if it was too dark for you, you can do that, and it makes it super, super light, right? Don't overwork it though, okay? Don't overwork it. That's just a simple sky. Boom, done. Walk away, step away from the painting, because sometimes we overwork it and then we just get so upset because the paper starts tearing or it starts getting splotchy. Watercolor is one of those finesse paintings. You really have to just kind of let the water do its job. Okay, so just back away, don't overwork it. Okay, not like acrylic where you can add a layer and then another layer and then another layer. We're not doing that. Okay, so now let's create our watercolor. I can slow down. But everybody should have a sky. Okay, if you're done with the sky, then let's move on. But if you're not done with the sky, don't worry about it. Again, this is something I want you to learn how to do quickly. This is, I know that some people like to go really slow, and that is okay. But for this tutorial, I want you to learn how to do it quick because water works quickly, right? You have to do it before it dries, and you have to learn how to do that. And you can still have the finesse, and you can still get the desired result without it taking forever. And so hopefully you're done with your sky. Okay, so now I'm going to get my water activated again. I'm just going to dip right in here and off to the side, and I'm going to go into my purple. And what I'm looking for is a lot. I am looking for a lot of purple. I want a good bit of purple, right? I love this color. And if you like blue, if you like greens, if you like reds, try with that later on, okay? If you feel like it's not as dark because you're using a paint palette like this, don't worry about it. It's okay. What I do want you to do though, is I want you to get enough in a puddle here that you can use it several times. If you just do a teeny little puddle like this little blue one right here, you're going to be like, oh, I didn't make enough. So make plenty, and it's just adding water and that purple. Now this purple is beautiful on its own, but you know what I want to do with it? I want to make it a rich purple. So I am going to come over here to this yellow, and I'm just going to get a little bit of yellow on the tip of my brush. And I'm going to blend that right in. Now, for those of you who can't see this, let me show you what I just did. Okay. I just made it a smoky purple. Okay, that's what I did. Let me show you the difference. Okay. This is purple, purple. This pretty little purple. You see how it's like a happy purple, pretty, like very bright purple. And when I added just a little teeny bit of the yellow to that purple, look what it does. It just becomes very intense, like a very emotional purple. Okay, so that's what I want you to create right here on your palette paper or on your paper plate or your plate, whatever you're doing. I want you to create a puddle. Okay, and I want you to make sure you have some yellow in it, enough to make it smoky purple, not mud. If it's looking brown to you, just add more purple. Okay, the idea here is 80% purple, 20% yellow. Okay, if you can do percentages, which I think you can. Even our youngest members out there can do that. Okay, so now I've got this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful purple here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come with it and I'm going to go over here to my scratch paper and I'm just going to make sure that it's intense enough for me. Okay, and I think that that's intense enough for me. Okay, if it isn't, you can certainly get more pigment on there. Okay, so now I have this intense, beautiful purple. My brush is fairly wet, but this is dry. So now we're doing wet on dry. Okay, and wet on dry looks like this. I have a little bit more control of the edges. And I'm going to follow my line. And this is the closest mountain range to me. It's going to be darker. Okay. And before that line dries, this is where I'm going to take and I'm going to bring that paint down. This is called a wash. And I'm going to bring it to that line. If it starts getting streaky, people, what do you need to do? Go and pick up some more paint, okay? If your paint is streaky, it's probably one, the pigment maybe isn't the best, or you've had a dry brush, or you've let the paint dry before you had time to work this, okay? So that is your first mountain range, okay? And it'll dry pretty much like that, okay? And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna let it dry. Okay, my cloud, my sky is dry. It's still a little cold, but it's not running water, okay? It's not, I can't, like if I go like this, I'm not getting anything, okay? That's what you want for our, whoopsie, sorry, for our next step, okay? And our next step is this. We're gonna go back over to our puddle here, but now we want it to be super light. So I'm gonna come down here and make another puddle. Same pigment, same color. That's why I said I wanted you to make a lot, right? And we're gonna come down here and guess what we're gonna do with it? We're gonna add just a ton of water. See how I'm just dropping a ton of water onto that? Boop, 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 boop. And maybe this is not a good idea. My water is here and my palette is here. What happens if I drip along the way? Oh, it's gonna make a mess. So let's bring that closer together, right? And now I am making, when I put more water in it, what's it doing? It's getting lighter and lighter and lighter. That's how you make the light, okay? So then I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna test it. Is it lighter than what I had before? It's very light compared to what I had before. And maybe I even wanted it a little bit lighter. Okay. Okay. Very, very light. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, yes, I'm using the same yellow and purple mix. That's why I wanted you to create enough here to use, because you're going to make 3 puddles with it. You're going to make 3 shades of this purple. You're going to make your original one. We're going to make a medium one eventually, and this is our lightest one. Okay, look what happened here. I was working over this, still a little wet, so I can work with it a little bit. Okay. Still a little wet, so no harm, no foul. Okay. I'm just using water to activate that. Okay, now I'm going to go back into my brush. I'm going to kind of dampen it a little bit. Now I'm going to go into my very lightest color that I just made. And I'm going to do the tippy top one. And I'm just going to outline it. Right to that sky. If your sky is still wet, you will see bleeding happen. And you do not want that, okay? And then with this one, we're just before that line dries, you don't want it to dry, I'm just gonna bring it down. And guess what? I can bring it down all the way because it's gonna dry and it'll be fine. See how light that is comparatively? Super, super light. Okay. Boom, done. Okay. Now I want you to see what it looks like when you just use straight up watercolor without a lot of water. I'm just going to dip right into that. Maybe get a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to just do a bottom. So this is pretty intense down here. And if you can tell, it has a lot less yellow in it, so it's not as moody as the top. Maybe it's just our bottom. Okay. Now we're going to let that dry. So while this is drying, I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that we're going to use for our flower. Oh, geez, look at that. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple techniques that I use for that we're going to use on our flower. So get yourself a little I'm going to move it. Okay, well, this one dries. We're going to work on this one for just a minute. Does not matter what color you use. If you had some from last week, which I do, by the way, have a little bit of, I have a little bit of red here. I wanted to show you a couple of different things that we're going to work on today. And that is mixing colors on the paper, soft edges and hard edges, and glazing. Those are the 3 things that we're going to work on today with our flower. So I want you to just pick up enough water to just activate that paint. It's going to be fairly, look, I can even mix it with my yellow. Okay, so now I have kind of this orangey color. It doesn't matter what it is, right? So let's do, when we have dry paper, and I put down, and I want you to just try this, and I put down some color here. I want you to notice that all the edges are pretty solid, right? Those are pretty clean edges there, okay? Now, and that's because it's dry paper with a wet brush. When I put down a color and it's still wet, you can tell it's still wet. See, I can still move stuff around. You can come in here to another color, as long as it's activated. And when I say activate, that means it has enough water in it. And you can come in and you can just take this and add another color to something. And then I can clean off my brush, right? And then I can just come in and I can move that around. And then I get the two colors. So that's mixing colors on your paper, okay? And that is really fun to do, especially when you're doing things like petals, when you're doing things like leaves, things like that, a bird's feather, when you want to go dark or light, or you want to just add like a different color to it. I'm going to come in again with just a different color, and it has to still be wet. This won't work if it's not. And I'm just going to, you see how I just dab that in there, and I just let the water have fun with it. Now, if I want a little bit more control, I make sure I go and clean off my brush and I take away the water, and then I can just move it around as necessary. But this is how you blend colors with watercolor on paper, and I love that, okay? So now I want you to, let's work, so this is a really good blending technique, okay? Mixing colors on paper. Make sure that you keep it wet or it's not gonna work, okay? Let's now do a soft edge, okay? So if, well, what happens if I, and I already showed you, right? If I get water here and then I activate some paint and I just touch it, it's gonna go wherever that water was, right? I don't really have much control over that. And for a good painting, I think you need both sharp edges and soft edges. But what if you want both? So this is what I want to show you. This is the technique I want you to learn today. And that's, you're going to come in here with a fairly damp, it's just damp brush. I've already brushed it off once, right? And I'm going to come in here. Actually, no, I'm going to stick with the blue. I like the blue. Okay. And it's activated enough, right? And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to give myself a good, whether it's a leaf or a petal or a something, right? Now, while those are all hard edges, what if I wanted it to become a soft edge so that it kind of blends, so it just softens? Well, then I just make sure while it's still wet that I go in and I clean off my brush, right? And it's a damp brush. It's not sopping wet. And then what I can do is I can just pull that down. And you see how it'll still move, but you've got like a darker edge, and then you can just keep moving it down until it's softer, right? So that's how you get like this more soft, and then you've got the darker, okay? And that's how you do it. It has to be damp, okay? If you added too much water to that, it's gonna do this and it's just gonna go everywhere, okay? But you have to make sure your brush is damp, okay? So I want you to try that again. Come in and activate a color and give yourself a nice shape here, whatever it may be, right? I'm gonna go and I'm gonna put it here so you can kind of see. I'm gonna clean off my brush. You see how I'm just wiping off that paint so that it's damp but not soaking wet? And then I'm just gonna come to this edge and I'm just gonna soften it. And that paint's only gonna go where I tell it to go, right? So this is where you have control, right? And if you want to even soften it a little bit more, right? That's how you're going to soften it, okay? That's a hard edge to a soft edge, okay? Now, if your brush is super dry, and you try to do this, it doesn't work. And you can hear that. You can hear it scraping, okay? And I don't like that scraping sound, okay? That's with a dry brush. That's going to ruin your brush, and you might not like that, okay? But if you have a really wet brush and you try to do that, you see how it just kind of just wants to just go wherever. So this is something that's a practice technique, going from a hard edge to a soft edge, okay? And that's, you just have to learn how damp your brush needs to be. Okay, now that we've had fun with that, let's put that off to the side. Okay, where are we with time? I don't see it on there. Okay, let's do our last mountain range. Now, is it dry? It is. It's dry enough. Now, the goal is, how do I get a color in between this one and this one, right? I got to make sure that I go back to my original. Oh, everything's sticking. Hopefully you have more workspace than I do. I feel like I have hardly any, but that's because I've got this little camera angle here. So I'm going to go back to my original, right? Make sure there's enough yellow in it to make sure that's the same color. And then I'm just going to make another pile here. I'm not going to use as much water. And I'm going to come back over here to my, and I'm going to make sure it's lighter than this one, but darker than that one. Okay. And I think I lost a bunch of yellow in that. So I'm going to come back in. If you didn't make enough, like I didn't feel like I made enough, you're going to have to rework it. And that's okay. You just have to test it. Just test it right here. Okay, that's about the same color, right? And it's lighter than that one, but darker than that one. So once I have that puddle, I'm just going to come in, and this is where you need to have control. You're doing your hard edge. Right, that's what I love about these round brushes. And don't let that dry or you'll get a line. Right? Now here's the part where we're going to go from that hard edge to that soft edge. How do we do that? I'm going to come in with a damp brush. I'm going to clean it off and I'm going to damp brush it, and then I'm going to pull it down, making sure that I'm not going into that other mountain range. See the control that I'm trying to take here? I'm going to just pull that down into that mountain and make sure that it's fairly even. If you're streaky, I don't think you have enough water on your brush or enough color on your brush. If you're streaky, I want you to just make sure you have enough water. Okay. And you see how that kind of just fades into that. And now, since I don't have that kind of fading in from this one, I'm just going to kind of go up in here. And I'm just going to do just with that, just that brush that I just barely used. I didn't even do anything with it. It's still, and I'm just going to kind of do that. And then I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. Okay, that's it. So now I have a dark, I have a medium, and I have a light. I hope you guys like that, okay? What time are we at? Okay. 4:15. When does this go until? 5 o'clock? Oh, we got plenty of time. We got 45 minutes. Okay, good, good, good. Okay, now, since I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to give everybody a minute to do this. So I'm going to just step back and let you guys work this. Again, don't overwork it. Don't make sure if it's coming out streaky, add a little bit more water. Don't worry about our edges. We're going to pull those off, okay? Make sure that we have like far away, light, medium, dark. Okay. Give everybody a chance to just kind of work theirs a little bit. How are you feeling about this? I hope everybody is enjoying watercolor. It can be tricky, but when you start to really do it, it's very calming. I think with watercolor, I feel less intense. I feel like I don't need all that detail and I don't need all that vibrant color. Don't get me wrong, I totally love vibrant. I'm a color girl. But the water washes are soothing and they can be freeing. And I just like to take my time and breathe through them, okay? So I hope that you're enjoying that. It doesn't have to be intense. Now I've seen some beautiful watercolors that are, but for these beginner classes, I like the softness of these. I like the soft edges, the soft color palette. And now that I've kind of worked that, I'm going to come back in here to my purple, since I have some here. And now I'm going to make mud. This is the fun part, right? I'm going to come in here to the yellow. I'm going to pick up a fair amount of it. Ooh, look at that. I totally see how brown that got. Woo, woo. I love it. Now watch what happens when I take this beautiful brown. This color right here is all the primary colors. Red, yellow, and blue, because blue and red make purple. So I've got all the primary colors and I've made this beautiful mud puddle right here. And now I'm going to take the darkest of the primary colors, that being blue, and I'm going to add that blue right to that puddle of brown. Oh my goodness, what is she making? A mess. No, I am making this very beautiful gray color. If it's too blue, I go back into my purple and my yellow. This is where blending colors on a palette gets its kind of, you get to just kind of experiment and see what you can create. That's what I really love about it. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to see what I've created. Oh, I love that color. It's not black and it's not gray. It's all the colors. And that's why it won't suck the life out of your painting, because all you've done is add all the colors together to create this beautiful shadowy dark effect. Now, I'm going to switch brushes. This is my biggest brush, whatever your biggest brush is, whether it's an 8 or a 10 or whatever you got. I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to clean it off good enough, and I'm going to put it down. And now I'm going to come over to, does everybody have a little brush? If you don't have a little brush, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Since this is a dark color, I don't have to use clean water for this. Okay. But I'm going to pick up some of that paint on my brush. And I'm going to come over here and I am going to start doing trees. And I'm going to start right here, and they're far away trees. How little? This is a 6. So a 4 will work too. If you have a number 2 brush, which is itty bitty, those still work. So this is a 6. I like 4s. I like 2s. So just smaller than what you used before. 3, a 5 will work. I think a 5 will work. You're just going to use the tip of it anyway. So I want you to practice using this tip. So before we move into this, sometimes I like to just come over to my practice sheet and I'm just going to start doing some line work. You see that? I want you to notice that they're not 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D, okay? Oh, if you used a 6 on the mountains, that's fine. It's whatever you had. So if you still have a small brush and you want to use this, that's fine. Okay, so they can't all be the same size, is what I'm saying, okay? So you got some taller trees and you got some shorter trees and you got some tall and maybe even a tall guy, and then you got another tall, and then there's some little ones. Okay, and then again, I don't want you to still do the same thing so it looks like a heartbeat, right? Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. You see, you don't want this one. No, no. And you don't want this one, right? You want a variety. And sometimes this is what helps me be more random, okay? If you need help being random because our brain uses it as a shortcut, then you can say things like this. I do this when I do bushes or flowers or tree limbs, right? I always am like, okay, here's grandma, and there's grandpa, and then mom and dad and all the little babies, right? I just give them families, right? And maybe it's just a mom and 2 kids. And maybe it's like my family and there were 10 of us. Crazy, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. You see how you can just do this randomly? Notice and here is something you have to work on, people. You just have to work on it. This is something that's a practiced event, just like your scales. And it is how light you use your brush. I am not pushing lightly, okay? I am barely touching. I'm just barely touching. That brush is on its tippy toes. This brush is a ballet dancer. It is soft and it's just using its tippy toes as it performs in front of mom and dad and auntie and uncle and all the little noisy kids, right? And I can come back over them and I can add some depth to that, right? And then I can just kind of bring that down. Notice I'm working with the lay of the land. I'm just pulling it down the lay of the land. And it can be streaky here. This is fine, right? Now, I did not make enough paint. So what am I going to do? Just going to go back in, make a little bit more. And I just mix that yellow and then purple until it makes that muddy color. And then I'll go and snatch some of that blue. Oh yeah, there's my color. And I can come back over here and I can test it on my, and it's okay if it's a different color. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I want this one to be a little bit more intense, so maybe a little less water. And now I'm going to come right here from the bottom of my paper, and I'm just going to flick up. Notice that I just flick it up. Okay, flick it up. Remember, these are not the same size either. I'm just going to flick it up. This is a practice. If you want to practice on here, practice your flipping it up. Flip. Flip. Oh, that one's a thick one at the bottom. Does that matter? No, that doesn't matter. In fact, let's do one of those. Nice thick at the bottom. And you notice I'm just pulling that branch tippy toe up. And I'm going to even go way up high. Right up past those mountain peaks. And I'm going to do a couple more. At the bottom, they're thicker than at the top. That's why I like to flip up. That's why I like to start here. Sometimes you could, if you wanted to, try this. This is a little trickier, where you start on your tippy toe and then you push down as you come down. If you want to try that, try it either way, because maybe you have more control going from top to bottom, or maybe you have more control going from the bottom to the top. Notice these ones are not connected. These ones are, right? And I can even go over some more of these if I wanted to. These are connected. They're far away. That's like a bunch of trees. But these ones, this is just the bark. This is just the tree branch or the limb, or what do you want to call it? The trunk. That's what I'm looking for. And here I am back into my paint. And now this can be fun. Okay, I'm going to try it on this one, and I want everybody to try this. Okay, try this one on a separate piece of paper before you do it. Flick, flick, flick. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here at the top, and I'm just going to do zigzags. Notice how I just zigzag that down? I start at the top. Now, is it going to be, if I do this, is that right? No, it has to be thicker at the bottom. This is somewhere you have to practice, right? Now, what happens if I do this? Right? Or this? Is my brush like that? Is my brush supposed to be like that? No, we're still doing our tippy toes. Right? So we're being gentle here at the top. We start at the top and maybe just do little lines, super little lines. And then as we approach the bottom, our lines get a little thicker. Oh, right there, the tippy top. Oh, there's just a little teeny branch. It's barely reaching to the sky. Right where that eagle is going to try to land. And is he going to be too big, or is he going to fit on that branch? Maybe not. So he needs a little bit bigger branches, maybe closer to the bottom. Notice I have white in here. I haven't filled it all in. Okay, this is something I want you to practice. Okay. And again, it's like a triangle shape, right? Because what are we doing here? We're making Christmas trees, right? Or the evergreen tree, right? So we're trying to do that kind of move, okay? In a very natural way, okay? So practice that a couple times. This is going to be the last thing we do on this, and then we're going to move to our flower. So I need everybody to move along with me here. I'm going to come and make some more paint. Maybe I ran out, and that's okay, because I know how to make that paint now. I've done it twice. I can do it a third time, right? You can do it a third time too. I can come over here and I can test it, make sure it's what I want. Okay, I think that's right. So I'm going to start with just one, right? And I'm just going to do and there was one little guy right here, right? So he's going to come down. Triangles, triangles. Think of that, right? Start at the top. You're just doing a couple little. See how I'm dabbing that? I'm just dabbing it. I really am. That's the beautiful thing with trees. Trees are very easy to draw because you're basically just dabbing the whole time. You are. You're just dabbing. You know, every time I teach this to my little 6th graders, they always have to do the dab when I say that. I can't even use that word anymore without those little cute 6th graders dabbing for me. If any of you understand what I mean by that, right? If you're a mother, you probably know exactly what that means. Or if you're a sixth grader, you know exactly what that means. Okay, I'm going in here, making some more paint. I keep running out. That's okay. And I'm just starting at the tippy top, and I'm just dabbing it across. And then I'm swiping it across. I'm leaving some open areas. Don't squelch those in between. So you, because if you're a photographer and you are standing right here and you want to get a picture of those mountains and there is no room between these trees, you're not going to get a good picture. So I just kind of like to give myself a good amount of space in between my trees. And this had a really thick branch. I was going to say he's a pretty big guy. And then my last little one right here, right off to my paper. That's it. Boom. You're like, what? Yes, that's it. That's all, right? If you want to come down here and kind of give it like a bottom, just kind of like, you can do that. I am done. Walk away from the painting. Take a deep breath in. Right? That wasn't deep breaths. Those were like little. You may not be ready to take your tape off yet, but I need my space. So don't feel like you have to rush this part. We had a little bleeding happen, just a little bit up here and over here. Doesn't matter. It's okay. If it's still wet and you got a lot of runny, don't move it around. It'll like start to fall, right? You can see that mine's a little wet, yeah, still, because it's got like a little, you can see it shines, but it's not wet enough. It's going to dribble off my paper. So that's my little cute little mountain range. I hope you guys had fun with that one. You've learned a lot in just this little thing. You've learned about soft edges and hard edges, blending, washes, tippy toe brushes, being random with our brushes, big brushes, little brushes. Okay. While everybody is finishing that up. Now, if you are not done with that and you feel like I've rushed you on that one, no worries. Stop where you're at because we're going to move on. And you can work on it later. They record these so that you can come back and you can work on it if you need to. Now I need to get myself another piece of paper here. Here's one. So while you're finishing that up and you're going to move it from your area, I'm going to get another piece of paper. And instead of taping down my paper this time, I'm going to tape right on the paper. Can you even see that? It's a very light tape. I'm going to just eyeball this, right? Try to be as not too crazy off, right? At least it, you know, I'm kind of eyeballing it a little bit. Make sure it's not wonky, right? I have two at the top and the bottom. And two on the sides here. Again, I'm just going to push it down. I love taping up my sides whenever I do a watercolor. I think my favorite part is taking the tape off and just looking at that very clean line. I don't have to worry about my edges. I don't have to worry about where I needed to stop and where I needed to start. I just kind of let it flow and then I can clean it up because I can just take off the tape. So you can't see this very well. Let me just show you. Like it's very light. I do have a square in there. Okay. And I'm going to put my purple and stuff off to the side because I'm not going to use that anymore. These are the new colors that I want you to get yourself. I have two dirty, look at this. Ah, big no-no. That's okay. Guess what I have on hand? Because I sometimes do that. Okay. Oh, I need to clean. If you have a lightly dirty cup, don't worry about having to get a new one. It's fine. But I'm going to put a new one right here for me. Okay. So we're going to do a sunflower. Now, that's not done. I had to let it dry, but we're going to do that. We're going to attempt a sunflower. And I think you guys can do that. I think it almost is a little bit easier than the mountain range we just did. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out where the center of my paper is, which is about right here. Now, do I do anything in the center ever? No, unless it's a portrait. I never do anything in the center. Again, I'm going to kind of come in and eyeball it, and I'm going to give myself thirds, right? Here's the top, here is the bottom, and I'm going to give myself, this is the third top of the paper, the middle third, and the bottom third. And I'm going to also do a third here and here, right? It's almost like you're giving yourself a 9 square. You can visualize that. You can draw it. You can give yourself little marks. I use these marks to help me, and it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to get a ruler out or anything like that, to help me put things off center. I'm going to put this flower off center. If you don't need these marks to go off center, then don't do it, right? And I'm just going to give myself a circle. Now, is that a perfect circle? No. Does it have to be? No, it does not have to be. And again, I'm going to just go a little lighter. Just going to erase it a little bit. Okay. I'm also going to erase these marks because I don't really need them. I just wanted you to see. Just remember that any mark you leave on your paper stays there. Okay. Now let's talk about colors. I am going to use 3 different colors. I'm going to use an orange, just a little bit of an orange, not a lot. I am going to, oh, actually I'm going to do more than that. Actually 5 colors. Let's go 5. How about that? I'm going to do 2 yellows. If you don't have 2 yellows, 1 is enough. It's fine. But I like, this is a yellow ochre and then this is a medium yellow. I like both because one's darker than the other. Every time I do a picture, I like to add at least 3 colors to it. If you can't see my circle, don't worry. I just did it for me and then I erased it, but it's just right here. And in just a minute, I'm going to paint that circle so you'll be able to see it better. I'm going to do a green because I'm going to use a green for the leaves, orange for just kind of like a highlight, and then a brown, any kind of brown. You can do the burnt umber, you can do the burnt sienna. If your package just says brown, which they don't usually say brown, it's usually either a burnt umber or burnt sienna. And I'm just going to put these on my thing, which I already did. I have my yellow, my brown, my orange, and here's my yellow ochre. And then I have some greens that I used last time. So if you already have some colors on there you used last time, don't waste it, okay? So let's get started. I'm going to take a middle-sized brush, okay, at 6, at 8, at 10, whichever one. I actually prefer on this one a little bit of a bigger brush. It's easier. Don't use your teeny brush. Use your biggest one you have, whichever one that may be. And I'm just going to go right here into a little bit of the brown. Activate it. And that's where I'm just going to draw my circle. Okay. You notice it doesn't have to be perfect. You notice that it's off center, and I'm just giving myself that. Just going to give myself that. I'm going to clean off my brush and my dirty pool. And then I'm going to do this, okay, where I dip. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to activate my yellow. Now we're going to do a very free flowing, and I know that it's getting close to time. Let's see, what is it? 4:41. We have about 20 minutes. No worries. Okay, I'm activating my yellow, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to start. And look, it bleeds right in. Does that matter? No, because this is just a, and I'm going to push down. You see I pushed down my brush a little bit, and I'm going to pull it out. Now, you see how it doesn't have to, it's just a leaf shape. It's just a petal shape. And I get that by putting here, and then I pull it out, and then I pull it up. And don't worry if you have some white spots. You can go in there and fix it up, okay? I'm going to do this all the way around. I'm leaving some white in areas, okay? So I touch, see how I push it, and then I pull it up, okay? And you may not be able to see mine very well, but you'll be able to see yours. You'll see where the water is. Now, every petal is going to look different. So if you're moving along here and you go back in and you activate, maybe sometimes you pull in some of that little bit of other browns or accidentally, you know, get a like orange or whatever in there, it's okay. This is going to give it some depth. And I'm going to touch it right here, and I'm going to push it down, and I'm going to bring it up. Now, does this petal look like that? No, it doesn't. And that's the beauty of the sunflower. That's what I love about the sunflower. And I'm just going to keep moving. This is a really fun one to practice because you got to learn how to use your brush, right? And some of these actually come off the, where it's just a little bit, and then you push down and then you pull up. So I want you to notice how there's even some space right there. Okay, I do not want to see this. This is what I'm hoping for you to avoid. Let me show you. We do not want to see that kind of thing. Okay, that right there is a beautiful cartoon flower. Okay, and that's not what we're going for here. Okay, they're not all perfect. They're not all touching. There's no white in between them. This is where you get to really kind of explore what your brush can do. Make sure you keep going in and activating your paint. And I'm going to touch it, and I'm going to pull it out. Try that. And then I can go back in here and touch it. Now, this is still wet. So what did I talk to you about adding a different color? Right? You can add a different color if it's still wet. And if that's too sharp for you, well, guess what you can do? You can pull it through, right? You can pull it a little bit through. I can come up here and add it to some of these others. That's the beauty of this one. Okay, so let's keep moving around. Push it down and pull it up. Some of them are skinny, some of them are fat. Some of them are more yellow, some of them have a little bit of the ochre in them, or the brown. Notice when I want to go in and clean up the edges, I'm on my tippy toes again. Every time I want control and every time I want to fix an edge, I'm always on my tippy toes. I'm always on my tippy toes, okay? I want you to just envision that beautiful ballet dancer on their tippy toes and the precision that they get because they have just one point on the ground. And that's really how this should work. Is just one point on the ground. Isn't this looking fun? I hope everybody is loving how these little petals, very simple petals, as you push up, And you can come into some of these that are still wet and add a little bit of the dark and let them blend. Just let them blend. This is where we get to just have fun and breathe and let it do, right? Without too much worry about, oh my gosh, that's not perfect. Okay. I'm going to push, and maybe this one goes off to the side. I love that idea. These do not have to be perfect. I can't stress that enough. You keep thinking, she's saying the same thing over and over again. The reason why is because our brains click in, and you have to really think about it. Every time I put one down, I'm like, okay, push out, bring up, doesn't have to be perfect. Just take those words into your brain and let your brain soak it in. I am going and I'm activate. Oops, I added a little green to that on accident. Does that matter? No, it doesn't matter. Look. Oh. Push out. Notice how I keep activating it. And I can add 2 more leaves. And 1 more right here. Notice I have white in between there, ladies and gentlemen. White. Some of these down here, you know, I can come into my brown, make sure I have enough water on my brush. And I'm just going to kind of add a little bit of another color and let it just kind of blend in there. And when I do that, where am I at on my brush? I'm at the tippy toe. Tippy toe. Even some of these that have dried, I have a wet brush. I can still come in and kind of just move them around a little bit. Look at that. Isn't that a pretty little flower? I love the sunflower. It's just got some movement and some color. I hope you're adding depth to it. Maybe I come up and steal some orange a little bit. Maybe I put a little bit of orange down here on these bottom ones because it's got a little bit of a shadow down here. Okay. Right. I'm just touching it. It adds to it. There you go. Okay. Don't overwork it. And now I'm going to let that dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to some green. Okay. Now, if you're still working on it, right, that's okay. I am not in love with this green color in my palette. I think it's way too green bright. So how do I tone down green? Do you remember? Green is made up of what 2 colors? Yellow and blue. So what is the 3rd primary color that we haven't used yet? That would be red. So I'm going to come over here to this red and I'm going to put a little teeny bit of red into my green. Ooh, that's it. And then I'm going to add a little yellow to it too. So this is where you can just kind of have fun. Now, if you don't have time for this and you don't want to take time to do this, just use the green you have. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm going to come in over here, just between 2 of these petals. I'm not going to touch. If I touch that yellow, what's it going to do? It's going to bleed right into this, right? And I'm just going to kind of give myself this leaf shape. I don't even know what the shape of a leaf the sunflower has. Shame on me for not knowing that. It's probably big, but I know it's green, right? So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to do that leaf shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to do the same thing I did. And I want a little bit of a darker area. So I can add a little bit of brown to my green. And I can just come in here and add that. And I'm just going to come in here and add just a little bit of green to this one too. Not a lot. What I'm looking for is a backdrop to this. And I'm only going to do 3 because 3 is the magic number. Okay. And they go off the page. Maybe this one's a little bit more yellow green. Actually, I'm going to do 5. And I'm just going to do like 5 green marks. They don't have to be perfect. It's just to give the idea that this sunflower isn't just hanging out to no man's land, right? He is coming from somewhere. And you can do like these little, you can just do these little fun little movements, right? That's what I love about watercolor. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's it, right? On the green, just kind of have some fun with it. And I've just kind of put them off to the side, right? I don't want it to look manufactured. Does that make sense? This is not a production line. Okay. And you see how some of this is like, I've gone in close to my yellow and my yellow bled through a little bit. That's okay. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. One other thing I want to do now, because my sunflower is not quite dry enough, and that is I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to give it a nice good cleaning. And then I'm going to dry it off really good. Just dry it off really good. Super dry. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of just like flick it a little bit, right? Because I want it to be kind of dry. If you have a toothbrush, and I didn't mention this in the thing, but a toothbrush works really well for this. Also a flat brush sometimes works really well for this, but you can use this because you have it, but I have a flat brush, so I'll show you. I'm actually going to get just the tip wet, and I'm going to come in here to yellow and brown, and I'm going to just kind of get that tip wet. And now watch what I'm going to do. And if your mom's close by, or your dog, or your sister, don't flick them. Just flick the paper. Okay, and you can't see mine very well. I'll show you in a minute, but if you want to add more, just make sure it's just the tippy tip of your brush. And I use my finger here, and I'm going to go flick, flick. And I'm going to do it in different directions. And this just kind of is like a little fun extra. Okay, I like it. I like doing that. Okay. That's still a little bit wet in the middle. You see if I touch it, it kind of moves a little bit.
Jamie, 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, well, we're almost done. What I want you to do, everybody, is I want you to take, if your middle is not dry, I want you to just dab it so that it is dry. Just dab it so it's dry. Okay? And I'm going to get any brush. Could be little or big or whatever. And I'm going to come into this brown here, and I'm going to add a little bit of green to that brown. Ooh, I added a lot of green to that brown. I want it to be more brown. So maybe I will come back into this red and make it more brown. Whichever brown you have, I kind of added a little bit of too much green to it, but just try to find yourself a really good brown somewhere. And I'm going to come in here And I have a littler brush, so I have a little bit more control. And that's where I'm gonna, and if you did not dry this good enough, right, it's gonna bleed into some of those others, but that'd be okay. Like if it bleeds a little bit, no worries. And I'm just gonna take that brown, and what am I gonna do? I'm just gonna give a center here. A center. And notice how I kind of left some of that open a little bit. Just for depth, right? And then I can come in here and on this back side, I can just give it a little bit of a dot. See how I'm just kind of dotting that around just for emphasis on texture. And notice how I'm kind of just giving it, so it's not really a circle anymore. I'm just kind of giving it like a fuzzy edge. That's okay too, right? Okay, and last thing, if you want to do this, you can come back into your yellows with your little brush, and you can dip it in the brown so it's a little bit darker. And I'm just going to come into each of these petals, and I'm just going to just add a little bit more depth if I wanted to. If you touch this middle part, guess what's going to happen? That brown's going to run right into it. So don't do that. See, I'm just going to kind of pulling a little bit. And this is just to give each of those little flower petals a little bit more depth. And they can still be wet, and you can still do this. This again is totally free. It does not, you don't need to outline it. You don't need to, you can dab it in there if you want. All I'm doing is just making sure each of those beautiful sunflower petals just gets a little love. Just a little bit of love, right? So that it's nice and bright. Okay, and now you can just kind of work with this if you want to. You may feel like I've rushed you on this. Maybe I did a little bit because I know that the time is short, but again, you can take your time on this. You have this video, so you can, you know, work with it again if you want. You can do it again if you'd like. Maybe the colors didn't turn out the way you want. Maybe you had some bleeding going on. Maybe you want to let it dry and give it one more glaze, which is just another color on top. Maybe you want to go back into some of these greens and just give it something like that, right? And you have the time to do that. Okay. I'd like to see this. Like if anybody would like to share their sunflower or their little mountain range, I'd love to see them. Yeah, share them with the group, share them. I'm going to let this dry and then I'll peel off my, well, I'm going to peel it off now. I told you that's my favorite part, right? And then I'm going to say goodbye. But I hope that as you are working with this, you are starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with it, that you're understanding a little bit and you're practicing. Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. So anyway, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Join me again next week. We're going to do a bird, and I think that that will be beautiful. So everybody, there's a website. She's going to send you a link. You can submit your pictures. If you need some critiquing, I will send you, hopefully can send you an email about that. But enjoy. I hope you had fun today. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating.
Thank you.